Audio and your life.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the live filmmaker Q&A for Short 7. The amazing films that we just saw are from all over the world, and we are lucky enough to be joined by several filmmakers. We have Sarah K. Rimmers from Bitten, Levi Buchanan from We Said Forever, which is his world premiere. Congratulations. Rami Kalan and Andy Wong from Odd Girl. And hopefully Andrew Madison from Doodle and Humayun Mirza from Destroyer of Worlds will be able to join us later. So if you guys have questions, you can watch in YouTube by hovering your pointer over the video window. At the bottom, it'll pop up like the video controls. You'll see the YouTube logo. If you click on that, it'll take you right to YouTube and you'll see the chat window on the side. And I'll be looking at those and asking questions as we go along. So hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. We just want to say we enjoyed all of your films. It was really interesting process this year because of being online, and we're just really grateful that you gave us your trust and confidence to care for your film properly and hope that you've been able to watch them in the films and have been enjoying them as well. One of the questions I always ask filmmakers kind of right off the bat is like, what was the impetus for your story? Like, do you just love horror films and are you constantly writing them, or do you tend to find a subject matter that you just have to talk about, or is it a combination of both? What's your process? Sarah, why don't you start?
Okay. I wanted to find a project for my dog Iggy. He was this crazy talented animal actor, and he was getting up there in age, and I was like, I need to make something with him because he's just, a rare beast. And someone I worked with, we shared a love, my fellow writer Emma, we love werewolves, and we were bouncing werewolf stories back and forth, and suddenly it just occurred to me that I have a dog and we love werewolves, and let's try to do it. And I do love horror movies, but this was like, I had been looking for a project to do with him, and that's sort of how it came about.
Nice. Do you normally not make horror movies, or do you just kind of not limit yourself?
I've been an editor, a feature editor for a while, so it's taken me, I've been wanting to direct my own stuff, and so Bitten was my first that I actually finally, it was like, I'm going to stop working on other people's stuff and I'm going to make my own stuff. So that was the first one. And I've got a second horror short in post right now. Like I love the genre. I've always loved it. And I'm going to keep making it.
Nice. Excellent. How about you, Levi?
Sure. So this one came about from a good friend of mine, Chris, and I. We were kind of bouncing ideas for short films back and forth, and he had mentioned something about a marriage counseling session gone awry, and I was like, do you mind if I run with that? And yeah, I love the idea of horror, using horror to kind of explore, themes and issues. I think anyone that's been, through a tough spot in a long-term relationship or a marriage or a divorce, that is, misery, that is horrifying. And so it was something I was really looking forward to playing around with. I just watched a movie the other night, the new David Co-op, You Should Have Left. And it's kind of fascinating. Like, I was more frightened watching a marriage disintegrate than watching the haunted house stuff, so that's kind of the stuff I enjoyed playing with and exploring here.
Hereditary. Oh yeah, Brian just muttering over their Hereditary.
Exactly.
Where the family drama becomes kind of almost overshadows the horror. And how about you, Rami and Andy?
I do particularly like writing horror in general. I just find the genre exciting to not only watch, but to be able to put pen to paper. But Odd Girl specifically was born out of a friend came up to me and told me about a horror film festival that was going on for screenwriting. And I decided to submit and kind of just base it off like a real life situation that happened and then make it supernatural. Obviously, there are no ghosts in my real life. But that's kind of how that bred from. It was from a festival that we ended up doing really well in, and we just decided to make it. And same as Sarah, that was also the first short that I directed and wrote. So now in my future writing, I've found that I like to branch out a little bit, but I think horror is always going to be kind of like my first love.
Nice.
For me, it's more about themes. I like the fish out of water stories, and when Rami approached me with the script, I was like, "Yeah, this sounds really cool. I'm down." I also like to like dabble in all different genres. So I've never done a horror either, so it seemed like interesting.
Nice. It's interesting to me sometimes because it seems like it's like half and half directors that we get are just they're making all horror all the time, and then we get a bunch of people that have made maybe one or two horror films but aren't necessarily like horror. They don't think of themselves as horror genre people, and it's I want to say like sometimes the ones that are made by the people who don't consider themselves horror genre directors are sometimes the most emotionally impactful um, to the story because they come with the story and are using the horror um, dressing or what am I trying to say? Slipping on the horror wrapper to get the story across. So, and actually, Rami, I have a question for you about Odd Girl. It was interesting to watch this because when it starts out, you kind of think that it's a bully story or like it's the weird new girl who no one likes to hang out with, and then there's like the nice girl who gives her the time of day and like feels like, well, let's be nice to this girl, like don't be jerks, guys. But then it turns into a whole different kind of story, and going through it. There's a little detail that I picked up on that Brian missed, and that's when um, the scene where she's having dinner with her mom and the candles are lit and her plate is empty, and I noticed like she wasn't eating, and she looks kind of pale. Is that I'm just going to ask you. I guess there's an occult rituals. There's something called a dumb supper, where you summon the ghost of somebody to be with you, and they have to be there while the candles are lit. Is that something that you had in mind when you made that scene?
I want to say yes, but no, no, it's not. That is really cool. Dumb suffer. I've never heard of that. But the what you did bring up, her being pale and her not eating, they were intentional. It wasn't necessarily for that spirit, but it was that Belinda was already dead the whole time, so she's not eating because she doesn't eat. And it's interesting that you brought up the paleness because we spent a really long time on makeup, and we really wanted to transition from Belinda being extremely pale, her in her dead form, to having more life in her face. And we wanted to make that transition the whole time. Whereas with Mindy, you see the opposite. She's full of life and she gets paler and paler. So those two aspects were very intentional, but the candles and the dinner part wasn't, although that sounds really cool. And maybe for the next one, I'll have that in mind.
I was just thinking about it because Brian is actually the one who talked to me about dumb suppers, and I think he had written a story.
Stole my question.
He had written a story a long time ago when we were first dating, and he was trying to impress me with it. So and it always stuck in my mind. And we had another film called Coffee Doubles, and it was a different kind of story, but it was a man sitting and poured coffee for his wife, and like all of a sudden she appears, but then she leaves, and you realize that he had just summoned her ghost for a moment. So that kind of thing is a strong
Iranian
thread.
film, right?
Yeah, that was an Iranian
That's beautiful.
filmmaker. So for Belinda with her mom and the ritual and things, like where did that element come in for you? Like this meeting of kind of teen drama and supernatural?
There's a few resources we drew from, and one was actually a Jewish mythological spirit called the Debuk, and that from we loosely drew from it, but it was a vengeful spirit that if someone dies with an unfulfilled quest, then they kind of come in and take the picture. So that was part of it. But the ritual itself, we have this show that films in Vancouver that's been filming for about 15 years called Supernatural. And and a lot of the aspects of the ritual itself, the chanting itself, that was actually drawn from the show, because the show does it brilliantly, and it's been doing it for 15 years. So we took some elements of that, and then the actual chanting itself. I don't know if anyone caught on, but it's actually just poetic English words said backwards.
Oh, I
Yeah,
did
so
not catch that.
we use every source we could. Like we used mythology, we used TV shows that were already there. We used our production designers' ideas as well. So we just drew from wherever we could.
Very nice. And what was the most challenging thing about incorporating those kind of supernatural elements into your script and as well as filming it?
The most challenging aspect, I think the thing that I struggled with was trying to be subtle with our supernatural influences, and not while making it make sense, because we didn't want to be obviously supernatural and obviously in your face with it. Like our story's more of a thriller than it is horror. At the same time, we didn't want people to not understand our story. So that was kind of the struggle with the supernatural. How do we have that supernatural feeling and mood of creepiness and uneasiness without making it so visually obvious?
Mhm. Well, nicely done.
Thank you.
Excellent. We have a question in the chat from Chris Stewart. We said Forever was the most surprising to me. I did not see the first reveal coming and loved the second one. The transition from comedy to horror was excellent. So I guess not really a question, but a compliment.
Well, thank you. No, I really appreciate that. That was, yeah, it was one of those things with the first reveal. It was, since it's, kind of billed itself as a, it's going to be showing up in horror. So there's the assumption that something out of the ordinary is going to happen. And so what I really wanted to do was to subvert, expectation, in the short. And so, let's say, say we're in the therapy session and she changes. I feel like the most common thing would be, oh, the wife has changed. Now we have to save her. Now we have to rescue her. We have to pull her back. We've seen that 800, 900 times. It's done. It's boring. It's a trope. And so the great way to turn that was like, no, he wants to save this marriage so badly. He loves his wife so much that he's willing to surrender his humanity and join her where she is. And so that's kind of where that came from, was wanting to take what's something that's commonly seen with exorcisms, et cetera, and turn it on its head.
Nice. And I think it also plays on the level of like gender dynamics in terms of like women all of a sudden becoming powerful and men wanting to, and him rather than wanting to hold her back is like, I don't want to get left behind. Just like, come with me. And that was really nice too.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for your makeup, that was all makeup and not CG?
Yeah, so all that are practical effects. Those came from a local Portland hair and makeup artist, Claire Brooksbank. She is phenomenal. I can't thank her enough for everything that she put into that. I still remember the first time when she started putting Allison, who plays the wife, when she put that first layer of pink on, and it's just like, I was like, oh, this is going to come together so beautifully. Like I say, the entire cast and crew, myself as included, we're all from Portland, so incredibly meaningful to get to debut this movie in the Portland Horror Film Festival.
Well,
And I also thank you. Well, and that I also want to say what an incredible honor it is to show this film with all of yours, Rami, Sarah, Andy. Your shorts were incredible. They're inspiring. They were funny. I was clapping during the transformation scene, Sarah, because I'm like, she's gonna go for it. She went for it. And so, no, what an incredible. This is an incredible afternoon. Gwen, I just want to thank you for including us, and an honor to be alongside everyone else.
It's our pleasure. So we're all three actors in the same room, like because you never see the therapist, you only hear their voice. When you were filming, were you and the therapist and I'm sorry, I've already I can't hold anything in my head right now. You're actors. So were all three of you in the same room while you were filming?
Yes. So actually, I'm in, because the therapist's office was a fairly small room, and we had kind of crew in there. I had to be outside,
Mhm.
kind of hovering over a monitor. So yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't be in there. Yeah, it was interesting to kind of have the two shot, and so yeah, it wanted to be very, very intimate, and the focus, strictly on them. It creates some moments when you're trying to do the transitions, and I'm glad that for some of the folks watching that it worked for them. Yeah, that's kind of how that came together.
Well, excellent. And Sean Merrier says he loved the makeup, and we said forever. He asked, was it airbrushed?
The base coat was, yeah.
And then just like how long did that take to apply?
Took a couple of hours on Allison, I believe, and maybe a little bit less than that on Craig, who played the husband. Yeah, her work is it is inspiring. It is incredible. She's phenomenal. I recommend anybody that is shooting anything with horror. I cannot recommend her enough.
Nice. Sarah, for your all the scenes with like cutting back and forth between the man and the dog, and the woman and her animal, how did you set out to accomplish those shots? Did you have to kind of um, plan that out in the script? Did you have that scripted already, the way that the camera work was done in the editing? I mean, as an editor with your background as editing, were you able to kind of see where you would need to shoot that?
Yeah, I had it all pretty meticulously storyboarded out, and I, sat down with my camera, my DP, and my editors, and we talked about it. And I think there's only one quick scene that was shot that we didn't use. Everything was really tightly planned out, and I knew what Iggy could do, and I knew how to shoot it so that that worked. So yeah, there was very little there was very little improv technically on set. Francine improved most of her lines. I gave her very just like basic, like, this is how you're talking to him, this is what you're talking about, and then I let her go. So all of that comedy is hers. I just told, this is the intent of the scene, have at it. Michael Curran had never been in a film project before. He's a contortionist, and we found him through the dance community. And yeah, and then Chomsky was the live wire. Maybe didn't. It took too long to set, we just had her on set for too long. She was so tired. It was like the first or second day of shooting, and she just didn't want to get up on the couch. She didn't know Michael. Michael was still getting used to and being comfortable on set, and everybody was getting to know each other. So I had a lot of cutting around and some post magic to make it seem like those two had some chemistry. And that Chomsky, willingly got up on the couch because she just wanted to lay down at that point. But, live and learn. Don't make dogs sit on set for, 8 hours before you use them. Iggy was cool with it, but Chomsky was not.
Yeah.
Diva, total diva.
And how did you find your actress? Because she was wonderful, and I loved that it wasn't just like a young woman. I loved that she was kind of an older, more experienced person.
Oh, she's so amazing. I actually saw her in a web series. My brother's a sound designer, and I went over to his apartment, and he was working on a web series, and she was playing a frontier woman, Asian pimp to a cowboy. And I was like, she's amazing. And so when we wrote Bitten, I was like, I know who I want. We have to find this woman. And she moved to New York. She's teaching at Tisch now. She was teaching at ACT in San Francisco and at Stanford, teaching acting, and now she's at Tisch. She's fantastic. She's amazing.
And what's the name of that web series?
I don't even remember. I can find out, but yeah.
Okay. I can Google it.
It was an incredible performance. It's memorable. Never seen anything like it. And she's really allergic to dogs, like
Oh no.
crazy allergic to dogs. So in the scene where she's laying in bed with Iggy, she was suffering. And I think it's in the film, like she sat up and like one of his hair, his like fur got in her eye and she's like, ah!
Oh
And
no.
we used it. But I mean, and also consider whether you're working with animals, are your actors allergic to animals?
Mhm.
Didn't realize that until she got to set.
Oh no.
Uh,
My goodness.
we
Well,
worked it out.
speaking of actors, Rami and Andy in Odd Girl, you have quite kind of a large cast compared to a lot of independent horror films. Did you like? How did you find your actors, and also like how many locations did you use, and what was involved in getting that? Because it really looked like you had. I mean, the high school, and then the shop in the high school, and the girl's house, and the dark rooms.
Andy, do you want to start with the locations and I'll do the casting part?
Sure. Yeah, it was mostly the school. That school had the dark room and like the woodworking shop and basically everything that takes place in the school. We shot inside the school, and the only other location we had was was the house. Um, so we basically shot one day at the like half a day at the house, and then shot 2 days at the school. And yeah, so in terms of location, there wasn't that many per se.
Mhm.
Do you want to go on to the cast, Rami?
Yeah, the casting process was a really long process. We did 3 days of casting, full days, so like 8 to 10 hours a day. Part of that was that I'm an actor in Vancouver, so I know how many talented actors there are, and there just aren't enough parts for us. So I really wanted to make sure that I saw everyone, so that for the next films I can see like who else I can use, and B, I really wanted the perfect cast for this. This was like my baby. It was my first film. I had a vision, so I just wanted to see as many people as possible. Um, and we had over 300 submissions for the 9 roles. So it was quite a lot, and we saw everyone that we could. And then we narrowed it down to the perfect cast.
Wow. I really liked your main actress. Sorry, I've watched like 60 films this weekend, and this morning I was like, I gotta watch the feed again because like all the characters' names are, for every film. Like I don't remember all of them, but she was really wonderful. Just kind of the vulnerability, and then
Mhm.
when it turns a little sinister, the way she was able to evoke that was incredible.
Yeah, she walked into the audition room, and when she walked out, we all looked at each other and we were like, yeah, she's the one. It was like the whole energy of the room had shifted, and it felt like there actually was a ghost that came in the room and left. Um,
Mm.
so she was super creepy to begin with. And then when we had rehearsals with her, she'd like do her thing and be really creepy, and then she'd be like, "Oh, a dog! I'm gonna play with the dog." So it's kind of like, oh, thank God, she's not actually, you know, she's stable.
She's
So
Okay.
very sweet in real life.
Not really gonna try to take over your body.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
And
she's
then
very
it was
sweet in real life.
interest. Go ahead. Sorry, Andy.
Oh, I was just saying she's very sweet in real life, not creepy at all.
yeah,
That's what acting is about.
yeah.
In the end, so there's an element of capturing that spiritual activity on camera and film, and I love this idea that photography, like film photography versus digital photography, can capture that because it leaves a physical impression on it. And at the end, when the friend's face goes kind of like woo, um, I had a question about whether we were supposed to take away from that the malicious spirit's work's not done. Is somebody else going to be
Absolutely.
and
That's
pray?
got it. That's 100% it. That's exactly what was happening. Because the whole story, there's one malicious spirit, and then at the very end, you realize this whole school is kind of infested. So it's kind of a precursor to either a feature or an episodic.
Okay.
But that's exactly it. What you just said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we were like, is it just limited to her and her mom, or is there more kind of happening
Yeah.
in the wider community?
There's a bit of a B story there as well. It's very hidden, but in the ending shot, you see the two boys melding into each other, and that's kind of a hint that the next evil spirit is actually Joshua,
Mhm.
the one that kind of lingers behind the lead boy the whole time. We don't give too many hints on that, but one of the major hints is that when he turns around, his neck cracks. And then at the ending, with the two spirits going into each other, that's just a clue that if we were to continue, then we would focus on Joshua's story.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. And you said are you currently developing that as a feature, or just kind
I
of in your mind to?
just kind of in my mind, yeah. Andy and I have been working on another horror comedy. We were working on it, and then Corona hit, and then I've kind of gotten a bit lazy, but a horror comedy we're working on. Then, depending on how this story goes with festivals, we might develop that further.
Okay, nice. So the high school, did they just let you like, yeah, go ahead and film everywhere? And was school in session at that time, or did you do it over the summer?
Um, I'm gonna let Andy handle that. 'Cause
Or was
Yeah.
that some guerrilla filmmaking happening?
No, we got permission from the school. However, they didn't tell us that it was like close to Christmas time, and so they didn't tell us that they were like setting up for concerts and setting up Christmas decorations throughout the halls and stuff like that to prepare for Christmas. And so we had to work around that, and we had to like basically tell them, or sometimes we took down the Christmas decorations ourselves when we had to shoot, and then put it back up after the shot.
Oh no. You're like, "Oh, just take this
Yeah.
down. Very carefully."
They
Oh
also
my
told us
goodness.
the school would be empty, and there was not 1 minute where the school was empty.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
like, did you have to pay to rent it, or did they just let you?
No, it was free, but we had technically rented it out. But I don't know like what went wrong, but there were about 6 different groups there over the 2 days
Oh my
there.
gosh.
It was like the busiest weekend. I don't know why, but it was just our luck.
Well, you managed to make it look perfect, and good job.
Yeah.
And we definitely looking forward to seeing if you, well, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with a horror comedy,
Thank you.
because that's one of our favorite things.
Yeah. Witness and Perfect was amazing, by the way, and Levi and Sarah, both of your films were amazing, like the horror and the comedy together. I was cackling as well watching both of them.
Thank you.
Welcome.
There's a question for Sarah. For Bitten, you said it was the wereman's first acting role. How did you convince him to be nude for that long?
It was part of the deal, just trying to find someone who was comfortable. So going into it, it was sort of like, this is the deal, trying to find someone who would do that. And we weren't really sure how to go about it at first, but he was totally game. Like once we found him, Michael was 100% in. We had some like dancer gear if he wanted to wear something, but it wasn't a super long shoot. But by like the second weekend, he was ridiculously comfortable being nude on set, maybe a little too comfortable. But it was easy. It was really easy. And the only thing I had to do for him was when we did the outside running shots, when it's full, when it's the wide shot, I gaff taped his feet.
Mm.
So like each toe, everything was covered, so he could kind of run with a degree of that was completely guerrilla, and just trying to catch as catch can at that moment. So at least he didn't have to worry too much about glass or anything.
Mm.
He was great, and it just trying to figure out what path, and it took us a little while to figure out that going through the circus arts dance community was the better way to go, because for a while we were like, do we go to the adult film community, and like, do we want to sit through those demo reels, like what do we want to do, and we had one casting person who left, who was just like, I can't do that, like I don't want to do that, and she's like, best of luck, but I'm just not up for that, and she walked away. And that ended up not being what we really wanted for a body type anyways. And Michael was perfect.
Yeah, he had a great look, like just very kind of
Oh,
open, and that open, trusting face.
yeah, he's super interesting, like just facial features and like personality. He's a really interesting, unique person, and it ended up just being perfect. And he wasn't a dog person when we shot it, but now he totally is. And he's like taking on dog walking as like a side job, and all his like Facebook posts have like a bazillion dogs in it. And he's like, I know so much more about dog movement now. And I was like, well, it's a little fucking late, but okay. He threw everything into it though. He studied dogs and like brought a lot. Like he came so prepared and so open to try everything, and was like took zero convincing. No
Nice.
convincing.
And what's next for you? Like you said, you're working on something that's in post because you were already filmed it.
Yeah.
But then after that's done, what do you think you're going to be up to?
Well, so I have like a micro horror short, it's just straight horror that's in post. I've got a comedy cooking web series that I kind of keep going, so I'm editing season 2 of that right now. And then I've got a day job, like I'm a film editor, and I work for Disney, and they got me busy, so I'm gonna be doing that for a while, I think. And I've got some, I've pitched some stuff around, and I've got some other scripts, a feature and some other shorts I'm developing. And so as I can find some time, it's just hard. I mean, before we went live, we were talking about the state of the world and coronavirus and what this means. And there is so much happening in the world right now that I'm exhausted. Like I'm emotionally exhausted. And for me, that's a difficult place to get creative in. I'm sure like all this will be processed in a script and some ideas later on down the road.
Yeah.
In ways that I don't always intend. Like there's a lot that came out in Bitten. Like why I wanted to make a film with my dog, and it was about, werewolves. Like Levi was saying, like there were things going on in my personal life, in my marriage, or my former marriage, that came out in that film, and I didn't even realize it till later. And a film critic was like, so this movie's about loneliness, and I was like, oh yeah, actually it is. So I think when I have the emotional space and the energy to think of new ideas, I think a lot of the anxiety that goes into being a human and an American right now is gonna filter its way into stuff. But right now, man, all I've got is the stuff that I was working on and scratching at before this all the pandemic and all. I don't know, man.
It's hard. We're in the middle of the lake right now. Once we get to the edge, maybe we'll be able to.
Yeah, like when Andy, you're like horror movies. I was like, man, I don't know how I'm gonna get through the rest of next week. Yeah. We'll see what happens.
And for Levi, what other film projects do you have going on? Like, are there things in the past, some of your past work that we can see?
So We Said Forever is the very first short film that I've ever made. It was one of those things where, as I started getting, judging by the gray in the beard, started getting a little bit older, I'm like, I haven't done this thing yet that I've always wanted to do. So, that in itself, was restorative and healing to make that happen. But then just so much writing. Like screenwriting was the format that I fell in love with as a kid, and then have been kind of doing it all the way through. And over the last few months, I think has been some of the most prolific. I think part of it's because we're kind of like locked in, but one of the things I've done is have turned We Said Forever into a pilot script, and then have been working on a couple other feature scripts as well.
Nice. Excellent. And Rami and Andy, what is next for you? Are you working on things now? Are you acting? Are you taking a little break to kind of figure out what's going on in the world?
So the acting industry has kind of been slowly restarting. So there's not too much in terms of that, except auditions are just starting to come in. No projects as of now. And then for writing, I've been kind of lazy for a couple months, but after this, I'm going to be finishing that horror comedy that I was making. And then I was also going to be making a comedy web series that's written, and it's something that I want to shoot right after lockdown is over. But I want to take some time because I don't want to be the person that has a film set and then someone gets COVID and then give it to the grandma. I just can't.
Sure.
I'm too neurotic. I can't handle that. So just those projects that I've been in pre-development for, be working on that. And then, like Sarah was saying, like there's a lot of things happening in the world that's opening our eyes up to a lot of injustices. And I think it's a good opportunity to be able to write for people that haven't had anything written for them. So that's definitely going to be my next goal when it comes to both writing and casting.
I've been
It's-
personally working on a lot of films about racism against the Chinese community, and just writing a lot of like little short stories and making.
Excellent, excellent. And Rami, when you said I've been lazy for a couple months, I know people get, when the lockdown started, people are like, I gotta learn a new hobby and all this stuff. And I was like, who are these people that are like, I can't even I don't even know what day it is sometimes, just
Yeah.
because I'm in a fog. So I just don't want anyone to feel bad if they did nothing that you would consider traditionally productive for a couple months, because this is unprecedented. And we all deal with that in different ways. Some of us just have to kind of retreat and regroup and figure out what's going on for ourselves, and some people have to jump into something completely new and learn 10 new skills if they if they want to.
I did learn how to bake. I did.
Oh,
do
nice.
that. Yeah.
What have you been baking?
Only two things: pancakes and pizza. But that's enough.
Those are two hard things to get right, in my
Really,
opinion.
all you need to know, though.
It really is. Yeah.
Excellent. So we've been joined by Drew Madison, who did Doodle, the amazing Doodle. Hi, Drew. Do you wanna say hi?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to butt in. I've been having internet issues, so I apologize for joining late, but thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We've talked a bit about each of the other folks' films, so I'd really love to talk to you about Doodle for a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure.
When we were reviewing submissions and came across Doodle, it was really striking because of how quiet it is of a film in terms of not only sound design and sound levels, but also kind of the pacing. And while it is kind of a paced film, like you never feel like it's, or at least I never felt like it was slow in terms of like, okay, when's something going to happen? And I think a large part of that is due to your lead actress, Victoria Newcomb. And she
Yep.
was
Virginia.
Virginia Newcomb,
Yeah.
sorry. She was fantastic. So what was the impetus for this story? Like, because it kind of starts off with a beautiful, weird image of this giant tree in the middle of a field, and she pulls the red pencil out of the tree, and that almost felt like that was like a writing prompt or something.
Yeah, it was more so, I guess, with funding and the availability of a good location, and then Virginia. She's been, well, more recently, she's been in some stuff that I think more people know her for. So right after, right when we started filming, she had just gotten done with The Death of Dick Long, the new A24 film. So I was really lucky to get her then. But she's incredible, and I had told her agent before she got on board with this that with that type of short film, I couldn't have done it with anybody besides her, because she really carried the thing. I think in all the festivals I've been in, I think I've heard the most about like what she does, and it's crazy to think. I've worked on a bunch of films with many actors and actresses, and she came the most prepared, was willing to put in the legwork before we actually went and filmed, which you don't get the leverage to do on a lot of short films. Normally it's like kind of a run and gun sort of thing, but she eventually became a creative producer after I realized that all the work that she had put into and just developing her character for that. So yeah, but she was outstanding to work with.
We really liked. I'm Brian, by the way.
Right?
We really liked the emotional content of this film. It felt like the story was sort of less about the horror and more about how she deals with loss.
Yeah.
And we felt it was really striking, and I think that's one thing that the pacing sort of lets you do is kind of feel that loss that she's experiencing and how she's dealing with it. Are you typically a horror film director? Is that the kind of film you normally make?
Yeah, and then even I think submitting this film to some horror festivals, in the back of my head, I'm like, does it qualify? Because it's a much more like, I guess, metaphysical, like psychological piece than it is horror. It's like right up that alley. You know, you have like the hardcore horror fans who are like, no, that's not horror at all. And then you have the some that are like, I can see that. It's a totally different, I feel like, feel than your typical ones. But to answer your question, that's the route I'm going. I think like as far as like my next project, I think horror is definitely like my avenue. Yeah.
Well, there's definitely there's sort of a monkey's paw quality to
Mhm.
the
I've
story.
heard that before.
Yeah, but it does walk a fine line. I noticed there's some plausible deniability about what's actually happening. You know, you never really see him at the end. You know, we think it's not a firefighter because the shadow doesn't look like it's wearing a helmet. You know, but there is sort of, it does kind of walk a line between sort of letting you in on whether or not there's actually been a supernatural occurrence.
I think that was the whole goal, and just the shadows and whatnot. That's kind of why we opened with one. We did have some scenes that were taken out of the final version that I think helped with that a little bit, but we wanted it to be like, we just wanted it to provoke thought, really, because I feel like everything that really happens in that film shows up twice, even the fire truck that you see at the beginning and end, and we just wanted that back and forth. I think that was the main thing, is when it was over, to get questions out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I I'm I don't always feel this way about this particular kind of horror. Like I tend to be like, I'm the person that watches Jacob's Ladder, and instead of seeing it as kind of a metaphor for how you know live your alternate lives, like sort of in your own psyche, I think of it as an actual supernatural film where he's sort of given a moment to live out, you know, his entire life. So I tend to diverge in my opinion because I prefer like purely supernatural explanations. But there are several pieces of fiction I think that walk that line successfully, including Doodle. I'm thinking of things like The Haunting of Hill House, the Shirley Jackson book that the Haunting movies are based on, where you really end the book, and it's such a frightening book, but you really get to the end, and you don't know what to think about if any of that actually happened or what some of it happened. Same way with Henry James' Turn of the Screw. You know, is it just a case of mental illness, or is it an actual haunting, or is it a little bit of both? You know, so I really like the way Doodle sort of tackles it in a very similar way. It kind of keeps you guessing about what's actually happening.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I also feel like it kind of carries there's another layer to it, this fear that you're going to do something that's going to hurt a loved one, because you can kind of, I don't know, there's the scene where she's kind of looking at the book and looking at what's happening and like, did I do this? Like, and like, I don't know, in the situation we're in right now with like COVID and how we're all very concerned, and it's uncertain how it's transmitted over long periods of time, and like there's just a lot of question about like, am I going to go out and then bring it back into my house and like get my loved one sick? So I saw an element of that in there as well, and that to me taps into like a deep fear of, like, did I harm someone unknowingly by doing this, and now I'm having to deal with the consequences because they're not here anymore.
That was, I think, the general consensus we had when we were teetering with, like, me and Virginia were talking about, should there ever be anything like directly that happens with anything that's drawn, or because it's all pretty much something happens and then we see an action. I think the only time that we see something happen immediately after someone's drawing is the little girl when she's in the dining room with like the son. But I think our big point for all of that was supposed to be absent-minded consequences. So yeah, you're right on par there.
What was the location that you filmed? Is that just a location that you rented, or is that someone's house that you know?
Yeah, the tree was in Buell, Alabama, and then the house was on West Alabama campus in Livingston, which are little small towns, and then the hospital was 2 locations in Alabama.
Are you in Alabama?
I am.
Okay. And Rami and Andy are in Vancouver. Sarah is in LA, and Levi is in Portland. Excellent.
Oh, cool.
I feel like we talked about that before we went live, but didn't really mention it in the chat. So, so we're all over. Well, thank you. I guess, let's see, where were we? We were about to wrap up, and then you came in, so I wanted to backtrack and have you talk for a moment. Did any of you other filmmakers have questions about Doodle, or for each other, about your process and like things about your films?
I had a question for Sarah, and I think you maybe answered it, but so when your lead actor was running naked through that street, I mean, did anyone come out and talk to you, or did people? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's we shot in my house and we ran up and down my block, and I knew my neighbors were pretty cool. I knew they would all go inside at a certain point. There weren't I don't think we had any young children on the street at that point. And I'm friends with my neighbors too, so I'm not going to do anything to upset them. So we shot this in 2014, end of 2014. It took a long time to get through post, just because we were all doing our jobs and trying to get editors who work all day as editors to then edit more. It's tough. So in 2014, it was more like 2015, right at the beginning, the Occupy Wall Street protests were happening. And this was all shot in Oakland. So I was living in Oakland at that time. And so there were big protests happening in Berkeley that night. And so pretty much the entire police force and everyone were in Berkeley. So even if someone had called the cops, we were not going to get on their radar. If anything, when we were shooting the stuff in the backyard, which is the opening of the film, we had to wait for the helicopters to clear so we could get some clean audio. But we did have because we had sort of spotters at the end of each end of the block, and we had someone with like a towel and a robe ready to wrap Michael up. But mostly it was like someone would yell "car," and he would dive out of the street behind a car. And at one point, a couple neighbors came home, and we were like, "Oh, we're so sorry," because he like ran in front of their car. And they were like just laughing. They're like, "Oh, it's fine. You guys don't worry about it. It's totally cool." They were great. It's I know my neighbors, and so it was it was a pretty funny night, because we just like figure it, like, how are we gonna do this? Okay, and it was December too, and Northern California is not crazy warm, so like trying to find a night that wasn't miserable, and that the crew, and yeah, they were just like in my SUV with the back, like they looked like a bobsled team, because we had the hatch up on the back, and the camera guy was at the edge of the truck, and then there'd be someone behind him, and then the lighting guy was there. There was like 4 guys in the truck, 2 in the back holding on, but then also like all the gear, like just driving up and down the street. There's one weird thing with a neighbor, but he's just a weird guy. I think he thought he was funny, but he scared the crap out of Michael. So we don't.
Presumably that was all Michael. He wasn't wearing like a prosthetic or anything, right?
That was all Michael.
That was all Michael.
Michael. And like totally easy about it. Like just was like, no problem. No hang-ups. He's a dancer. That's what he does.
I've personally found that most people who are in dance, acrobatics, or any kind of thing that they really have to use their body to do their performance are not just like, it's my body, it's okay. Like they're not weird about, they don't have weird hang-ups about like people seeing them because they have trained their body to be seen.
The crew was the one that took the longer time to adapt to it. Like because we shot like the first reveal scene of him standing up like the first weekend, and it was a 2-camera thing, so we had it low for the then, and then he stands up into the higher camera. But the guy who was in the camera that was closer to the ground, I'm standing behind them. We've got the 2 cameras, and I'm sort of standing there, and I noticed that when Michael stood up, his junk was like right in the camera. And the cameraman just went like this. And I just like, but by like the third weekend, one of them came up to me and he's like, it was weird at first, but now it's like totally fine. And I don't even notice there's a naked man walking around. And he's like, this has been such a unique experience. So they all got over it. But that first weekend there was a lot of awkwardness, and I didn't prepare them or try to counsel them through it. I was just like, figure it out, deal. We did. We did. They're all a bunch of like animation people. They all worked on kids movies, like not what we're used to seeing on a day-to-day. So it was pretty funny.
So Sarah, you worked with dogs in your film, and Drew, you had a bird in your film. And the bird kind of plays, I think, an important part to some of the cues that you pick up on. And there's the moment when she hears the bird upstairs after she's written some words in her book. And then you hear the bird. During the scenes where they're in the same room with the bird and you see the bird, was that bird making those sounds, or was that recorded and added later?
No, no ADR for that. But the lady that did come in said that, her bird could do all this on command. And I had asked her for it to learn a certain song, which kind of didn't work. It kind of did, but you definitely can't make out what it is really. But when they got there, it took about 3 to 4 hours just to get maybe 15 minutes worth of recording. But we got it that day, and luckily that was just a slow day in general. I focused like that day to be like one scene plus the bird scenes, and that was it. And then, but yeah, no ADR. That all worked out for us, thankfully.
Wow, that's impressive. Well, excellent. I'm gonna open it up again if you guys have questions for each other. Otherwise, we can wrap up. No. All right, let's wrap up. So do you guys have social media accounts that people can follow you on, like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram? Maybe just shout them out so that people, if they want to find out more about you and your pets and what you're working on, they can meet up with you in cyberspace.
Well, you can follow, I've got an Instagram account for my films and my web series. That's Best Bad Dog Films. And that's also on Facebook, and Benton has a Facebook page, and the cooking comedy web series is Family Recipes with Allison and Sarah, and that's on YouTube. And we also have a Instagram and Facebook page with the same name.
How about you, Levi? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rami.
No, Rami, please.
Oh, okay. If you wanted to follow me, it's just my name on Instagram, RAMIKHLON. But all of our Odd Girl information is in our own Instagram, which is @OddGirlFilm. And then Andy's production company also lists everywhere we're screening in other films.
Yeah, so I've got a production company, my Instagram. My company is called Lonely Artists Productions, and it has a website, and you can follow all the films there.
Go ahead, Levi.
So let's see. So on it's Hey Now It's Levi, but with like an underline between each word, and then you can also find me on Twitter at iLevi. And so there you'll find stuff about me and projects I'm working on, as well as a comic book called Pink Hearts, set in a Portland karaoke bar. Something I'm really proud of. That's also up there.
Cool.
And Sarah, what was yours again? I was gonna go. I followed. I got you last three guys. What was yours?
Best bad dog films.
Gotcha.
Bad dog.
Mine's Doodle.
Another opportunity to plug.
Did y'all hear me? I couldn't tell. Oh, mine's at Doodle the Film on Instagram, and I don't post anywhere on any personal or anything, so that's where I live.
Well, excellent. Thank you again for making your wonderful films and letting us show them and being here with us for the Q&A. It was really great to get to meet you all in virtual reality or in the virtual world, and hopefully we can at some point meet in person. We'd love to have you again at the festival. So when you make your next film, please keep us in mind for it. And, we'd love to get you into the theater. And
yeah, hopefully next time we'll be back in the Hollywood Theater. It's a beautiful nonprofit movie palace here in Portland. Levi's probably familiar with it.
Yes.
Built in 1926. Originally had a mezzanine, but now it's been cut into 3 auditoriums. And it's just a beautiful, restored pre-Art Deco theater. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And normally that's one of our things. That's what we tell filmmakers, can we be playing on the 60-foot screen and 7.1 sound? And this time we've gone out over people's TVs and iPads. But we're so glad you could be here to do it with us, because it
means a lot.
It's been a strange year so far, and I think it means a lot to the people watching. So thank you.
Thank you for hosting this, Gwen and Brian.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So I'm going to slip back behind the scenes and end the live stream, but thanks for being here.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so
Thank you so
for
much.
those of you audience members watching, let's see, The Brain That Wouldn't Die is playing right now. You guys have time to watch it though. Both those video streams will be available until 1 p.m. tomorrow. We'll be back here at 4:45 with the cast and crew of The Brain That Wouldn't Die. And that's their world premiere, so it's going to be a bunch of cast and crew on that. So stay tuned if you're interested in catching that. If you don't catch it live because you want to see the movie first, it'll be recorded and you can watch it later. Yeah, so thank you all.